we talk a lot about the secret, and strategy is unlocking the secret, finding the secret. And I think the way to find the secret is, as he says, through a better set of questions. Say there's a food brand listening to this, say there's a supermarket listening to this, say there's any brand that is trying to create that point of difference and their strategy, what are some of the questions they can ask themselves to tease out and find that, what you want is a better set of questions?
Well, I mean, I got a few questions straight off.
Yeah, let's bounce this off.
But I guess I would sort of just sort of frame them within the idea that I think that the thing that people struggle with when creating value, and strategy is the process of creating value, is that we all necessarily, we're all kind of thinking on rails. And, we all sort of have
when you say rails, do you mean like a train rail?
Yeah, like a train rail, yeah. We're all very limited in the way that we think about our business, our category, our lives. Everything is sort of built on this sort of learned perceptions. Because it's the way it has to be, because there is just too many possibilities out there in the world that if you were actually open to all the true possibilities, your head would cave in. So let's just say, to be very sort of boring about it, let's say you're running a toothpaste brand or something. You have an understanding of, generally speaking, what toothpaste looks like, what toothpaste tastes like, what people want from their toothpaste, how toothpaste is sold, and all of these things, which are actually quite artificial restrictions on the concept of toothpaste. But you have to have them in order to be able to sort of have some guardrails to operate within. You can't just be questioning everything. And it might be the same thing with the way that you're living your life. You might think that, okay, well, I go to school and I go to university and then I go on a grad scheme or whatever it might be. We all have these sort of boxed in, narrow, on rails assumptions over how things are done. And we know logically that they are much smaller than the total set of possibilities out there. But you can't just be doing just random shit all the time, because, most things are going to be ineffective. At least these narrow possibilities, they're tried and tested and they somewhat work. So if you do a really generic toothpaste, it's not going to have any strategic advantages. It's not going to have any leverage. It's not going to have any creativity. It's not going to have any real sort of life behind it. But at least it still will operate as a toothpaste, and that's not nothing. So it's not a terrible place to start. But to your point about questions, I guess what you need is a way to sort of safely and in a controlled way break out of these on-rails ways of thinking. And to kind of ask some questions which will make you look at it in a fresh way. And most of the answers that you're going to get are just going to be random nonsense, because most of the sort of information in the world, if you like, is random nonsense. But you just, every so often, you're going to stumble across something which is a sort of major breakthrough insight, and which changes the way you do things in an effective way. So to give you I'll just punch out 3 questions, just sort of the first things that come to my mind. So number one of my classics is, how do you disagree with your competitors? This is in the context of a business, obviously. What you find is that most businesses, they actually, although they might think that they are in some way different from their competitors, it's not really difference that you should be looking for, because a lot of that stuff is superficial and kind of not really true difference at all. The only marker that you have for true difference is disagreement. If you can say, look, all the other toothpaste out there think X, so for sake of argument, I don't know, they think that toothpaste should be in a paste as opposed to, I don't know, being solid or liquid. I mean, I'm making that up completely. Until you've got a point of disagreement like that, you don't really have any leverage to build difference. So first thing is, how do we disagree? And what you're going to find very quickly is the chances are you don't disagree on anything. You and all your competitors, you all actually fundamentally have the same opinions on the world, and you're all approaching the problem from the same sort of value set. And again, you can apply this to a person as well. You might, how do you disagree with other people might be one way about the way you're conducting your life. And then someone will say something like, Well, I think that, I don't know, I think it's really important to be kind, and other people are really unkind. But that's like a fake disagreement. Everybody on the face of it thinks that being kind is important. So you actually have to find a good faith disagreement where there is real white space between you and other people. So that's one question.
Just a few things.
Yeah, sure. Go on.
So I think we're taught in business school, which is super narrow-minded, like, oh, what's your point of difference? And I think so many brands, I wrote about this in my newsletter, are fighting on the surface level of USP, point of difference. What did I use? So we're more prebiotic, we're more probiotic, we're more panbiotic, whatever the fuck it is, right? But actually, if you go deeper into and this is where it links to the spirituality of strategy. If you go deeper into the point of disagreement, it's much harder to go into. It's a place where you've got to kind of go more into your soul as a founder, but that's where that's the foundational level. And then you can build the pretty picture on top, which is the USPs, i.e. the point of difference. But it all starts with a point of disagreement. And I think there's a few things on this that, and I love the way you said, oh, we disagree on being kind versus not kind. And it's almost on a kind of macro brand level, it takes... Point of difference is nice. It's school. It's kind of school playground. Like, oh, you're kind. We're slightly more kind. It's very nice, but it takes fucking cojones to do something like Liquid Death and say we actually fucking disagree with you on all of these things. But then when you do that, you have this a sort of velocity or kind of flight of imagination that takes you off the rails to this other kind of world, which is your Liquid Deaths. It's your Oatleys. Where I'm going with this is how I think to get this kind of flight of imagination requires a little bit of chaos. And this is what I was interviewing the Ocean about this morning. Is he was talking about half the reason of the Devonshire's success. You know what it is. It's this new pub that's opened that it's absolutely rammed, and it's like they do so many things, like point of disagreement to the nth mile. You actually go in there. Like they don't have bodyguards, bouncers. They call them like ghosts. So all these bouncers are just in and out. They weave through the evening and are super kind. They're almost like an additional front of house. Crazy way of thinking. But what he said to me is like, there's a lot of chaos in our strategy, and chaos creates this new way of thinking. How important is chaos and kind of courage, those two things, in terms of getting to this deeper level of disagreement versus surface level point of difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think your analogy between like the point of difference is the superficial surface level version of disagreement is really, really spot on. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I love that. It's very true. I would separate chaos from courage. The chaos is important because I think that you just need to generate sort of fodder and new ways of thinking, a multitude of stuff in order to find something good. So the purpose of asking questions like, what is your point of disagreement? Or, other kind of like mind-breaking questions that you might ask is simply to put that fodder out there and to generate that chaos. But ultimately, at some point, you're going to have to select something of value from it and then focus in on that. And at that point, it'll be very unchaotic once you've actually sort of like picked your lane, picked your strategy, picked what you're going to be all about. There's nothing chaotic about Liquid Death, to use that example. They know exactly what they're about, but maybe it was a chaotic process to get there. The courage is an even bigger part of it, but not for the reason you would think. Not for the obvious reason that like, oh well, if you're going to do something different, you have to be courageous. I mean, that's all true, but I think that sort of goes without saying. I think that there's another part to it where at some point, if you're going to build leverage and you're going to kind of get an advantage and you're going to build something that really means something to people and something that really has an impact, you're going to have to make a decision within that. There's going to be one big binary fuck off decision, which is just clearly night and day from what other people are doing. And to actually, decisions like this, they can't be justified with data. You can't know beforehand that they're going to work. Everything ultimately comes back to just one bloke or one girl's opinion. That's all it's ever going to be. Eventually, once you've gone through all the analysis and all the discussion, it's just going to be, do you reckon that this is a good thing to do? And I think that something that stops people from really finding interesting new angles and creating interesting new businesses is that they aren't prepared to back themselves. They aren't prepared to actually just do something just because they reckon it would be a good idea. But you look at any of the sort of great founders of history and all your usual case studies, and you read the books about Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or whoever it might be, the thing that comes through loud and clear from all of these things is that the decisions that they made that had a big impact were just them doing what they bloody well felt like. And there was no giant team of analysts backing them up or feeding them information, So you got to think that if a multi-billion-dollar company is actually being run on effectively the whims of what one person just kind of feels like on that day, your little company, well, why can't you do the same?